Good day. Today we are going to take up Unit 13 of MJM022 Principles of Page Design. This unit is structured to understand what is design, the learning outcomes, understanding design concepts, stages of design thinking process, elements of graphic design, design principles, and the relevance of designing. What is a design? A design does not have a definite definition. It is distinct and unique with respect to each user. We can categorize it as a pattern which guides our vision and hence ensures that our environment is easier to navigate. It is omnipresent. You find designs everywhere. At the end of this unit, these are the learning outcomes that we are going to look at. Describe the basics of designing and designing as a process. Use the concept of designing in your day-to-day life. Apply designing in the teaching learning processes. So as we looked at in the previous slide, when we said design is omnipresent and it is just a pattern. So when we say a design concept, here we refer to a graphic design concept. So what is a graphic design? There are different angles, there are different definitions to what a graphic design is. Seizure says that art and practice of planning, projecting ideas and experiences with visual and textual content is graphic design. In simple terms, it translates a construct into a blueprint using images and related elements. Without a graphic design, or let us say with the help of a graphic design, it helps arrange the message and helps convey the same to the user and also captures the reader's attention. Now this design is again personal in terms of it depends on the interpretation and the thinking process. Now, for example, if for the ads that were of the older generation, or a few years back, if I would say rightly, the interpretation of us as kids then would be very different from how we perceive it today, or how our kids now at this age would perceive the same advertisement. So that is how design concepts, understanding of design concepts keep changing. There are two types of graphic design. One is the interactive design, as we all know, and the next is motion graphics. I think motion graphics are very familiar right now with the edtech space growing rapidly. George Campbell's 5 stages of design thinking processes are empathize, define, ideate, prototype, and test. So empathize is when you stand on the reader's shoes and look at their views, get a feedback from them, and see what is it that they want to see, either in a new newspaper or in the existing print media. When you say define, it is a data collection and the data analysis of the feedback that has been collected from the readers and come up with certain goals and objectives which match the feedback. Ideate is to generate ideas based on these goals and objectives that have been defined, realistic ideas that can be implemented. Next is the prototype stage, where you create small prototype using the ideas that can be immediately put into action. And the final one is the test stage. So where these ideas have been defined now into a complete package and they are put into a test environment. It undergoes rigorous testing to see if all the feedback that has been received has been incorporated, and also it helps identify the pitfalls and the shortcomings. So these are the 5 stages of the design thinking process. Moving on, we have the elements of graphic design. Now this is an important section of the unit where we're looking at the elements that are used to create or visualize the graphic design. So when you have the design principles along with these design elements, they form the core of the graphic design. Without these design elements, it would be difficult to convert an idea into a design. Now, let us look at what are the basic design elements that are needed. The first one being the lines. Lines, as we all know, move from one point to another. There are different types of lines: curved, straight, bold, different types. So these are the different. Now each design and each design element, each design uses these shapes to the maximum, uses these lines to the maximum. What are the functions of lines? Lines can be used to draw grids, borders, structures, can form many shapes as and how it is needed. Lines, as we all know, are highlighters to mark any important text or a shape. The next important design element is the shape itself. If you would remember in your earlier classes, in school days, you would have read about the different type of shapes. One being the geometric shapes, which are the hard-edged borders, which have well-defined borders, such as an exact square, a rhombus, etc. Meanwhile, there are organic shapes which have soft, smooth borders also. They can be formed using curved lines. These are the type of shapes. Moving forward, the functions of shapes. Shapes are of two kinds, or the functions are of two kinds. One is the meaningful shapes, where each shape defines the importance, highlights the expression that is needed. And the next is the positive and negative shapes. Here, positive is defined as black in color and negative is defined as white in color. Hence, these two together form the foreground and the background. Next, as we all know, is the texture. Texture, in simple terms, is what we feel when either we see or we touch or feel. Similarly, there are two kinds of texture. One is the tactile texture and the next is the visual texture. So tactile texture is what you feel while you touch that particular material or the design, such as a coarse texture or a fine texture or something that you actually use to reduce the friction. So there are different kinds of tactile textures. Similarly, a visual texture is something that is a texture that is produced as a mark on the surface. like you either erase on it, you rub on it, there's some cleaning that is happening on a surface, and then you see that there is a mark that is formed. So this is the visual texture. Next element is the form or the forms. Now what are forms? You say it is a form of a body, it is a form of an animal. You kind of imply to the space that that particular thing occupies. Now form is broadly classified into two types. One is the two-dimensional form and the next is a three-dimensional form. So two-dimensional forms are seen at 180 degrees and they have only the width associated, as we all know. Meanwhile, three-dimensional forms are seen at 360 degrees and can be tactile in nature. Illusions also form an important aspect into this. Next is the space. Space actually looks at the sense of shape. Looks at the sense of space that the shape occupies. Apologies for that. Hence, when you actually place an object on above a horizontal line, you imagine there is a horizontal line that is running across, and you place an object that is above the horizontal line, you feel that the object is far and smaller. Similarly, vice versa. When you place it below, you actually feel this, or you place it on the line, you feel that it is closer to you. Colors also make an important judgment in space. Some colors or some objects, when dark in color, actually appear closer to the viewer than the ones that are light. As we looked at the design in the initial phases, it is very personal and subjective to a person and to his mindset. An important element of design that we're going to cover now is the color. So color is extremely based on personal experience and the cultural background. There are people who prefer dark tones, dark colors and dark surroundings, to some who actually prefer very, very light environment around them. Colors are of three types: the tone, the hue and the saturation. When we say a tone, we look at the wide range of colors that exist. When in a hue, you say the same color ranging from light to dark, the variations that appear in that. Saturation is the full intensity while proceeding from brightness to grayness. What is the color wheel or the pigment mixture? When you say a color wheel, you all know what are the primary colors. Red, green and blue are the primary color. Red, yellow and blue are the primary colors. And all other secondary colors are formed by mixing these primary colors. Now, what are additive and subtractive primaries? Did you know that red, green and blue are actually additive primaries or additive colors? And subtractive primaries are cyan, magenta, yellow and black. That is, these colors can be either toned down or toned up by adding the additive and the subtractive primaries accordingly. Next is the contrast and the harmony of the colors. Now, function and perception of a design depends largely on the color and also the amount of color. Hence, the harmony of colors within a design is extremely important to ensure that the message is completely conveyed to the reader. Now, on arranging the colors side by side, you see that some colors are embedded within it and different intensities are created. This is known as a simultaneous contrast. As we looked at the elements of the basic design, we are moving to the design principles. The design principles are the design process. Now, for any initial design team, the visual research and the references are the primary process. The reference point is from where he actually sees or actually gets the idea. That is the focal point from where the rest of the imagination is developed into. When you have the blueprint or the creation, the user requirement being put on an imaginative screen, using these elements, the design team actually undergoes a lot through the process. Understand and see how these elements can be used at varied levels. The next principle is on the harmony, the synchronization of various size, color, contrast in the perfect combination, so that none of them actually stay one level above and make it look like difficult for the reader to understand what is happening in the design. The next is the rhythm and the movement. Visual movements in design using the visual elements is referred to as the rhythm. Contrast is the pattern of contrast lies on the characteristic difference in the basic elements. Certain shapes get highlighted while the color within it might be low. So these contrasting environments that are created in the design highlights or tones down certain points. Balance ensures that the reader gets a visual appeal to the entire design element, or he gets enthralled to read what is there. Unity is a perfect combination of shapes, color, contrast, which are all in sync with each other. Variety is with respect to the ideas, depends on each design team on how they use all these design elements in the most interesting permutation and combination to give the best attractive soul to the reader. And the last one is on emphasis. There are certain points which need to be emphasized, which needs to be highlighted. Hence, these are also to be taken care. The last topic in this unit is the relevance of designing. Now, why do we need to design? Why do we need to design? Yes, design creation needs to match the needs of the user. Remember when we said the design thinking process, where we initially created the feedback, we know what the user wants. So now we design to match those needs. Next is the creativity. Now, there is a lot of difference between the creativity of an artist and the creativity of a design team. The design team needs to be on par with the needs of the user. The prototyping and the brainstorming should all undergo these main points, should all take into care these points as into if it meets the customer requirements. Hence, the design elements will also be used as such. Now, there is a certain amount of business also that is there involved into this design. It cannot be impulsive. It has to take into account the global competition, the uniqueness, the thoughtfulness, and yet should be within the limits, the boundary lines that are defined by the reader. Thank you for listening to this presentation.